We're so anxious to make really, really big changes really quickly, and it's just stupid. And it's stupid for the reasons that Peterson's laying out, risking literally all the progress that we've made, all of our stability, because of your idea of what you think is going to work well. It's an unbelievable level of arrogance. People who are well and truly revolutionary have an unbelievable amount of mental arrogance that is just quite astonishing to me.
There's so many obvious downsides to the traditional sectarian dogmatic approach that we should want to get out of the religion business as fast as possible.
Okay, but as fast as possible.
Daily reminder, please subscribe both to myself and to the Pangbird channel, which produces these clips.
But do you mean that it has always been true that we should always have gotten away from it as fast as possible? Or do you mean now we should get away from it as fast as possible, but there's a point somewhere in the past where it might have been true that actually the best, the most, the richest path to well-being might have been encoded metaphorically?
Oh yeah, that's certainly possible. And in fact, you might even say it was likely based on the fact that we have all of these systems still around, right?
It's also still true. And the reason for that, to some extent, it is still necessary for us to encode our morality and our prescriptions for behavior within metaphor. Religion tends to be the best way to do that, but not necessarily. That's still necessary because human beings are motivated by narrative. Human beings are not motivated by data, not at our root, not by our natural nature. Harris himself has talked about this. One little girl is a tragedy, a million little girls in trouble is a statistic, right? Data is not what drives people. Narrative is. Cultural norms are. It's like, it would be nice if that's not what it was like, but that is what it is like. That is still what human nature is like. And, you could argue that, over time we could get away from that, but I'm generally very suspicious of people who think that they can just engineer humans to be different from our base nature. We can improve, but I don't think we're ever perfectible. And I certainly don't think that we're ever going to be computer-like logical. So, I look sideways at that kind of idea. But, that's my little thesis there.
So we still have the systems around in part because we still think in metaphor, and we actually can't help it because
correct.
Half of our brain is oriented towards metaphor. But
can I get you to clarify something now?
Yes.
Okay. So
I assume that Peterson's talking about the difference between left brain, right brain. I know it's been a while since I took psych. But I know one of them is more logical and one of them is more focused on emotion, which is, by the way, I'm butchering that. That is a very simplistic way of looking at it, and is not super accurate. But that general vibe of half of your brain being more focused on being analytical and half of your brain being more focused on feeling and on kind of the more looser parts of reality, I know that is true. So you guys should look into that. So I'm assuming that's what he's talking about, but I'm not sure because it was kind of vague there.
So you have argued, and you've actually quite surprised me by doing so, you've argued that the dogmatism is a bug and not a feature. You've argued...
No, it's a bug and a feature.
Okay, it's a bug and a feature. Good. So,
yeah.
Yes.
But what I thought I heard you say was that...
So how is that possible? Dogmatism is horrible. Yeah, it's a bug in a lot of ways, and I probably don't need to tell you how because I've read your comments, so I know you guys are all very aware of what the problems with dogmatism are. But it is also beneficial because it allows people literally a how-to book on how to live, and that seems kind of demeaning, but it's really not, because life is really hard and really complicated, and somebody trying to figure it out on their own without guidance of history is going to be having a hard time. Even if our culture is made up of very mild suggestions on how to live your life, that's also going to make things more difficult for people than society having rather firm rules or dogmas about how to live your life. So there's also the feature there that should not be underestimated, especially in today's culture, which has seemed to just spin off into just massive amounts of chaos and anxiety and stuff like that. So there really is something to the idea that having some cultural norms, that having some cultural dogmas, some real, solid, actually substantial expectations for how people should live their lives is a massive feature. Now, it also has a bug, and it also should not be absolute, because that's how you get to tyranny. And it has all of its downsides, but that you know of. But, dogma's a little bit underrated, I would say.
That the resistance to update
Yes.
was a problem, that effectively it was an obstacle.
Yeah, so is lack of resistance to update.
Right, okay,
There's
good.
problems everywhere, man.
Well, there's a tension. Okay.
There is a tension.
There's a
There's
tension.
a terrible tension.
Okay.
Right, well, look at it this
Yeah.
way. Look at it this way. Most new ideas are stupid and dangerous.
But most
some of
old
them
ideas
vital.
are as well. I mean,
But
that's
some of them are vital. Right? And so we're screwed both
That's
ways.
also not true. Like, most ideas that have ever been had are stupid and dangerous. I don't know how many ideas that have become, I don't even know how you categorize this, but the ideas that have become encoded and are enduring in modern traditions that still have staying power, or at least had staying power like 30 years ago, because today is a weird time. Let's say that. Now, I don't know how you categorize old ideas that count as part of our tradition and old ideas that don't, but let's assume that you could categorize that in, let's say, a reasonable way. I would bet you all the money I have that the proportion of ideas within that corpus of tradition within Western civilization, the percentage of those ideas that have some real merit to them, there's a higher percentage of that in those categories than there is, and there is a lower percentage in the scope of all ideas that have been had that are outside of that category that have similar amounts of merit. There are much more bad new ideas than there are bad enduring old ideas. Not old ideas in terms of that they've ever been had in history, but ideas that are old and have endured till now. And the reason for that is just because they've lasted the test of time, because at the very least they're stable. And the new ideas have not been tested by time, and therefore there hasn't been a separation of wheat from chaff there. So yeah, I think that's pretty reasonable.
Ways. It's like, well, if we stay locked in our current mode of apprehension, all hell's going to break loose. If we generate a whole bunch of new solutions, most of them are going to be wrong and we're going to die. And so what we need to do
Quite a
is,
conundrum.
well, it's a Darwinian claim in some sense, is that despite the fact that most new ideas are stupid and dangerous, a subset of them are so vital that if we don't incorporate them, we're all going to perish. That's the bloody existential.
I like the note of Darwin there, right? Because evolution is not a revolutionary process, right? Like, if you have the wolf or the dog, let's say this is microevolution, say. So the wolf become the dog by like magically and violently and very quickly massively transforming into a pug. The wolf became a dog by default holding on to all of the attributes of a wolf and then like making little tinkerings around the edges, very, very small adjustments to see what works and what doesn't. And also making those adjustments in response to the environment. Some of it was random, of course, because there is just random gene mutation, but a lot of it is in direct response to the environment. And I think that this is how our society should work as well. We're so anxious to make really, really big changes really quickly, and it's just stupid. And it's stupid for the reasons that Peterson's laying out. I think that the evolving of culture and the evolving of our cultural norms should mirror actual evolution, where we have a strong preference for what already exists because we know it works, and the stuff that doesn't work so well, we subject to tiny little micro adjustments very tentatively. We see what works, we see what doesn't, and then we make incremental progress. And that way we don't lose what we have while also being able to update. Because a revolutionary type of thought is just risking literally all the progress that we've made, all of our stability, because of your idea of what you think is going to work well. It's an unbelievable level of arrogance. People who are well and truly revolutionary have an unbelievable amount of mental arrogance that is just quite astonishing to me. Just an unbelievable lack of gratitude a lot of the time. Maybe not like emotionally, like I'm not saying that like emotionally they're ungrateful people, although oftentimes they are. Just as an intellectual level, that's necessarily the case. So yeah, I really, again, interesting mention of Darwin there. I think that we should stick to the evolutionary model for updating our cultures. We should update because if you don't evolve, you die. Unless you're like a crab or something like that. Because crabs don't evolve and they just, like, crustaceans, I should say. Crustaceans have been around forever. But for most organisms, if their species doesn't evolve to the environment, they're going to die. So, yeah, both are necessary. Both are necessary. We've just overcorrected, I think.
Condition.